Hi, welcome to Constitutional Chats, hosted by me, Janine Turner,
and Kathy Gillespie,
with students
Dakari Chapman
and me, Tova Kaplan.
Join us as we discuss hot topic issues with constitutional experts. It's sponsored by Constituting America.
Welcome to Constitutional Chats. We're thrilled you're with us today. Come on in virtually. Hey, the world is starting to get back to normal, but we can't really have these in person nationwide. So I guess we'll still be doing the Zooms. Zoom, a new word in the dictionary that no one knew about before COVID. Speaking of COVID, today is about COVID vaccination proof and the Constitution, with our special guest, backed by popular demand, Judge Michael Warren. It's going to be a great show. Come on in. We have a little questionnaire for you. We just want to know how old you are, so we can make sure whether we use a lot of big words or not. That's what we want to know. That's all. That's the only reason we want to know. So scroll around and let us know if you're a middle school, high school, college student. Go up and down there, fan, friend, grandparent, teacher, just let us know. And then our oh so awesome Aubrey Jackman, to tell us the results. And then we will all know. Aubrey Jackman I will introduce, and then she will, Aubrey, make sure you give yourself some camera time when you come back so people can see her face. Is our team, she's on our team, and she's a media director, our media director, responsible for all of our fabulous technology. Aubrey is this year's We the Future, Constituting America's We the Future, Best College STEM winner. We're very proud of her, thrilled to have her on our team. She is born and raised in Utah, and she's the middle of 7 children. A captain and 7 children. What's the fearsome lot of that? Oh, we talked about that last week. They got that a lot because there's 7 children and they are also talented in singing, I'm sure, too, right? She is a student at Brigham Young University, inspired to be an athletic coach. Aubrey Jackman, say hello.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Janine. So I'll just share the poll results really quick. So we have 30% parent and grandparents with children, and then we have 24% fans, 11% donors, 8% family, and 8% friends. We have 14% teachers, and then we have 3% elementary school students and 3% middle and high school students. So we're so glad that all of you are here today.
Yay, very good. We're thrilled you're here. Thank you, Aubrey. And I want to introduce, I am the president and co-president. I'm founder and co-president of Constituting America. And Kathy Gillespie is co-president with me. We're like a right wing and left wing on an eagle, and we fly, and without each other, we just wouldn't be getting off the ground. And the donors, you are our wind beneath our wings that makes the entire organization fly, and that's the truth. So Kathy is going to, maybe or maybe not, I think we have an anonymous donor today, I heard. But Kathy, say hello. Let me tell you a little bit about Kathy. Kathy, it was the chief of staff on the Hill for 2 decades or more. Just the most amazing administrative person on the planet and leader. And she's also one of the 16 or 17 private citizens picked to be on the Semi-Quincentennial Commission planning the 250th anniversary of our country. Very prestigious post. And she was also president of the White House Fellows. So Kathy, which is also a big deal. Kathy Gillespie, say hello.
Hi, Janine. Thank you very much. Well, we want to thank our donor, our sponsor today, who is one of our monthly donors, and he does not like to have his name used, but he did want us to encourage everyone to consider becoming a monthly donor. Now, that our sponsor today has been a monthly donor with Constituting America for 8 years, and we thank him so much for his monthly contributions. Really keep us going and help us every month fund our programs, such as our school speaking program, these chats, our online 90-day studies. We're currently doing the Declaration of Independence. and our winter promotion. And Aubrey, we thought Aubrey would just show really quickly, if you want to become a monthly donor, all you have to do is click on the donate button on the homepage of our website, and then you just choose where it says monthly donation with the heart. And so we thank you all for considering, even if you give $5, $10, $15, $20, $25 a month, every little bit helps. And we're soon going to be announcing a drive to increase our number of monthly donors. So we thank our sponsor today, who is a monthly donor, and thank you all for being on with us today.
Yeah, sorry about the sirens. I'm in New York City. It's kind of an all-day thing around here. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, we talked before the show. We want to have a movie night where we show all the works of our winners, their PSAs, their short films, a movie night. Wouldn't that be fun? Maybe even some of their speeches. And we have a little donor drive in between. You could join us. You could bring people. It could be a lot of fun. All right, moving on regarding the show, I want to introduce the rest of our panel. We have the oh so extraordinary Tova Lev-Kaplan. Tova Lev-Kaplan's a junior in high school that you've never known, and we've known her since she was an 8th grader. She's just truly extraordinary. You are going to see her. You will see her as the ambassador, the United States ambassador to the UN, or the Secretary of State, or the president, whatever she wants to be. She is that extraordinary. We're lucky, lucky, lucky to have her as a part of our team. And Tova has won our We the Future contest 3 times, both left brain, right brain, STEM, app, and with the arts, with the public service announcement. And she runs our youth advisory board, our national youth advisory board, like a CEO of a top 100 company. She's passionate about inspiring young people to know and use their constitutional rights. We just think Tova is exceptional. Tova Lev-Kaplan, welcome to the show, and say hello.
Thank you so much, Janine. It's so great to be here as always. I can't believe we've been doing this for so long. This has been like the main thing I've been doing this pandemic, and it's been so great that we've been able to do this. Thank you to all of you who've been with us since the beginning, or even those who are just joining us this week. We're so excited to have you. Thank you to our anonymous donor. That's so amazing. And please, to everyone else, give generously, because as a student, I know I've just been impacted so much. Like, the entire trajectory of my life is different for the better because of the organization. So I would definitely urge you to give, but can't wait to get into the topic today. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Tova. Thank you. All right, and I'm going to introduce the oh so extraordinary brother team here. They're not twins. I wondered if, but we've known Jewel and Jordan Gilbert for years as well. For I don't know, four years. They're extraordinary. They're just extraordinary. You're going to see them clutching Tonys and Oscars. That's what I foresee. Of course, you guys could rule the world too if you wanted to, but I know they're really in the arts. So let me tell you a little bit about Jewel and Jordan Gilbert. Jewel and Jordan Gilbert. Jewel is the executive producer and Jordan is the operations director for their company, Sing for America, which is a family-based company that the brothers co-founded. Sing for America seeks to show the art of truth and light with capital T and L through live performances, and both are proud winners of the We the Future contest. Yay! Sing for America is an actor-run theater company which specializes in semi-professional musicals, private training in the arts, school drama solutions, and public entertainment events, all while revealing a colorblind world stage. Jewel and Jordan are graduates of Moravian College, where they earned a BA in musical performance and dramatic production. But they're equally as intellectually stimulating. You will hear this today. Sometimes I ask questions and I just get lost because they're so intellectual. And I'm like, what? What? What are they saying? So Jewel and Jordan Gilbert, welcome to the show.
We're just theatrical, Janine, that's all. but big news for us though, we're doing SpongeBob this summer. SpongeBob the musical, we're the first in really anywhere near us, anywhere. Just got released to be able to be done by, amateur theaters off Broadway. So, and we're also the first ones doing a musical in our area since everything happened last March. So if you're anywhere near us, come on out. And we have a lot of hotels in this area. So you could come from far away too, if there's nothing going on where you are, because we're one of maybe 2 theaters doing anything this summer by us. And we have a very, very theater rich area. I mean, we have like at least 10 community theaters. We have 3-4 art centers, state theater. We have of course, New York and Philly only a little bit. So people travel to Broadway all the time from here. So to not only have about 2 shows going on all this whole summer, and we're one of them, it's going to be big. You'd love to see it. And also just puts us in a good mood because it's SpongeBob the musical, of course.
That's terrific. And tell us where you are exactly so people know, because we don't even talk about
Yeah,
that.
we're in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. This show is going to be in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. If people have heard of the area, maybe they've heard of Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's about an hour north of Philadelphia. Music Fest is the second biggest music festival in the country, and that's here in Bethlehem, PA. So it's easy to get to. We also have an airport, 2 airports, so you could fly in as long as there's no vaccine passports needed.
Yeah, which we're going to talk about today. I trust me, I've been having this discussion with my doctor. So this is going to be a great discussion. Well, congratulations on that. And I would love to see your show. So count me in. And I'm on the East Coast now, so I could just probably easily drop out.
Hey.
Yeah. So I'm one of those that will drive in to see it. All righty, ladies and gentlemen, we're to the topic. COVID vaccination proof and the United States Constitution. It's a really fabulous topic, actually. And our guest is back by popular demand, Judge Michael Warren. Drum roll, please. And I'm going to tell you about Judge Michael Warren. Okay, he is, hang on, I'm finding it. So I want to read it so I get it just right. All right, he was appointed to the Oakland Circuit Court in December of 2002. The Honorable Michael Warren was appointed to the Oakland Circuit Court in December of 2002. He was named Top Judge of the Decade in 2019 and Top Judge of the Year in 2018. I'd like to come sit in your courtroom too and watch you in action. He is co-creator of Patriot Week with his then 10-year-old daughter, Leah, which can be found on www.patriotweek.org. He's also host of Patriot Lessons, American History and Civics podcast. Thank you for doing all of that, Judge Warren. Judge Warren co-authored America's Survival Guide, How to Stop America's Impending Suicide by Reclaiming Our First Principles in History. And Judge Warren also authored several constitutional law surveys for Wayne Law, He periodically teaches constitutional law at Western Michigan Cooley Law School and is the originator of several legal reforms. Cool. I'd like to know what those are. He has received the Lifetime Achievement Award by the International Association of Top Professionals. Judge Warren is a frequent essayist for Constituting America's 90-Day Study series, including essays on the Declaration of Independence, the 19th Amendment, and the history of Michigan's statehood and Constitution. And we're going to have a cool series, by the way, on the Declaration of Independence and the signers. So we will talk about that later. But we're thrilled to have you, Judge Michael Warren, the Honorable Michael Warren. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, you start. You talk to us about,
okay.
And then we will. Oh, but go ahead. I think you were going to say something else.
No, I was just saying, anytime you want to come to my courtroom, you are more than welcome. It's a public courtroom. You can actually zoom in and watch court today. I'm in the middle of a very exciting bench trial. So we've done what we can in this crisis to make ourselves available to the public. So that invitation is always open for you. And how
do you find the Zoom link to watch you?
It's actually on our website, but I could certainly share it if you ever want. Sometimes we're definitely the best show in town.
I'm sure about that. What's the website?
So it's oakgov.com, and then you'd have to search for me under the judges, and then there's a link by which you can obtain either you can request it or you can link to it directly. I can't remember what system's up today, but
oakgov.com. All righty.
You got it.
Well, let's talk about this COVID vaccine proof and the Constitution, COVID vaccination proof and the Constitution.
All right. So I have been instructed by the powers that be that I only have 3 to 5 minutes to do an overview. I also know that we have a very wide range of ages and educational levels. So I'm going to try my best to make this as simple as possible. And the first thing with that question is the way that it was phrased to me is, can the government require you to have a passport proving that you have had COVID-19 vaccinations? So that's the question I'm prepared to talk about. When you ask that question, the first question you have to ask is, when you say the government, what government? We have learned in the course of this pandemic, and hopefully before, that there are many different governments that we could be talking about. The one that's closest to you is your city or your village or your township, whatever that might be called. Then you have your county, then you have your state, and then you have the federal government. I'm being very careful to use the word federal government. That's the government that's headquartered in Washington, D.C., because we do not have a national government. And I'll explain what that means in just a moment. So we have this little thing called the Constitution. I have this pocket Constitution. Oh, let's see if you can, there you go. So this got you talked about the Declaration of Independence. There's no bigger fan than me, as well as the Constitution. And so you should always start with your document, what's printed and what people have agreed to. The way that our system is set up is that for the state, your state government, you basically has as much authority as you can have in a government, unless the state has a constitution or some other law that restricts, prevents, limits its authority. And that's called the police power. And the police power isn't just like policemen driving around. It's anything that's health and safety, education, family, kind of the nuts and bolts of what you think about for a local government. Roads, sewers, electricity, police, fire department, hospitals, all that stuff is normally in the purview of the states. The federal government is exactly the opposite. It only has the power that is given to it by the federal Constitution. So we call that, a fancy term for that is enumerated powers. Some people also refer to it as express powers, but there's actually a list of powers that the federal government has. And then we have what's called the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which provides that if the power isn't expressly put into the federal Constitution, the states have that power. Some people like to call that's really what we call federalism. Some people call it reserve powers to the states, however you want to look at it. So we have this dual system where the states have basically all the power it can have unless it's been given to the federal Constitution. And in the federal Constitution, or it's otherwise restricted in the state Constitution. And then in the federal Constitution, it only has the powers that are specifically listed. So I'm going to read to you the list of enumerated powers. It's in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. There's a few others kind of scattered through the Constitution, but this is the main list. And so it says Congress shall have power to, well, I guess I should kind of paraphrase this for everybody. You can have taxes. You can provide for you as the federal government can provide for the federal defense and general welfare. It can borrow money. It can regulate the economy between states and with foreign nations. It can set up rules of naturalization, which is immigration. It has power over immigration, and with the Indian tribes, Native American tribes. It can establish money and punishing people that counterfeit money, establish postal roads and post offices, patents and copyrights, and establish, the Constitution only provides for the Supreme Court. It can create lower courts. It can define and punish piracies on the high seas. So it can go after pirates. It's very minute, right? Very, very refined. Declare war, raise an army, provide a navy, regulate the army and navy, call forth a militia, and organize the militia. And then there's Washington, D.C. governing Washington, D.C., and make all other laws necessary and proper for carrying out what I just said. So you'll notice there is nothing, not a single thing about health, right? You might say, well, wait a minute. We got all this federal government, and they're spending all this money on the vaccine. And so how can that be if there isn't a power that's specifically listed there? Well, one power was the ability to tax and spend money. So the federal government has chosen. Now there's an old debate, which I'm not going to get into, about whether or not they really could spend the money on this. Federal Constitution, Supreme Court rulings have found that they can basically spend money on what they can agree to, unless it's specifically prohibited. So they can spend money on vaccines. The next question is, can they order you to carry around a passport? That's different than spending money, right? Spending money is, we're going to spend money on vaccine, make it available for people. Ordering somebody to do something, that's normally called a regulation. And the federal government doesn't have a specific power for regulating health and welfare. So they do all that stuff through the spending power, okay? The Affordable Care Act, for those of you, Obamacare, the most recent thing that was federal intervention into healthcare, they did it. There was this big debate over the individual mandate, which required you to get healthcare. And the court said they cannot require you to get healthcare. It's unconstitutional because it's trying to force you to engage in commerce, you have to buy a product, healthcare. But what they said was, you can punish people through the tax code for failing to have healthcare. So that's how the individual mandate was constitutional. And then, interestingly, they've now deleted the penalty. So you're ordered to do it, but there's no penalty for it. On the state side, on the other hand, normally it has the authority to order you to do things unless there's some kind of constitutional protection against it. So, and I should caveat all this, there are no cases right now that I'm aware of. So I'm just doing a Judge Warren general Constitution 101. I'm sure there's lots of arguments I haven't thought about. But on the state side, normally you can order people. You can't drive unless you have a license. You can't use drugs. You can't, there's all kinds of things that illicit drugs, all kinds of requirements the state can impose on you. So there's some argument that you could be required to carry a passport. On the other hand, we have constitutional rights to privacy, and we have, which the United States Supreme Court has found, this was controversial at the time, it's still a little controversial, that there is a general right to privacy. And then there is also a right to liberty. And so forcing somebody to do anything always raises a question about whether or not you're infringing on somebody's liberty. And then normally there's like a test that the courts will look at. It's kind of a cost benefit analysis. Is the harm that's being addressed in the regulation sufficiently strong enough to overcome the reduction in your liberty? The privacy stuff also gets even more complicated because the federal government has established privacy laws, often referred to as HIPAA, and don't even ask me what the acronym stands for because I don't know. It's HIPPA, Health Information Protection something Act, Privacy Protection Act, I think it is. And that says that you have a right to the privacy of your medical condition unless you decide, unless there's a good reason. Like, for example, if you sue somebody in court and you're saying you hurt me, and then they say, well, you have to tell us what the information is about your injury, otherwise you can't do the suit, those kinds of things. So federal law would also come into play here in connection with the right. So I have, I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. I don't know if you guys even know who that is, but I'm using this as my passport for today. For those of you that are younger, the top of it says clean your room and the bottom says, tell the truth. So this is your passport. And the question is, you should clean your room and you should tell the truth, right? Is, can the government require you to take your passport and have it in your pocket? And the answer is, it's a great question. We really don't know, because that particular question has never been litigated. They haven't gone to court and had a court argument, but there's all kinds of reasons. For example, federal government only has a small number of powers. I read them to you. They got to find, if it's the federal government, Joe Biden, Congress passed, President Biden and the Congress pass a law and say you must carry your passport. Got to carry this thing. Then you got to ask, well, where in the Constitution, what law, what provision, what power are they using? Think of it as like a plug for electricity. Anytime the federal government does something, you got to plug the electricity in. You got to find that socket. It's very hard to find the socket unless it's spending or taxing. So they could say, if you don't carry your passport, we're going to fine you. We're going to tax you $1,000 a year if you don't carry that. Based on what happened with the Affordable Care Act, that probably would be constitutional. But if they just said, we're going to make you do it because we think it's important, the answer is no. Almost certainly no.
Okay, so I'm going to step in here because we have about 30 minutes left, and all of us have to have questions. I'm the producer of the show. I'm watching the clock. But that was really terrific, and it was fantastic. Thank you, Honorable Judge Michael Warren. Okay, I have so many things racing around my mind because one is requiring you to get the vaccination, and the other issue is really carrying proof of that vaccination. And if you'll just make all your answers sort of lightning round, so I can make sure I get to Tova and Jewel and Jordan and Kathy. But when I think about that they can make you get the vaccine, I think about the polio vaccine. And I remember being in school, and we all had to line up and get the polio vaccine. And I don't think there was any and if, and schools certainly do it. They say you can't come unless you have a certain list of vaccines. So I'm curious about that polio vaccine and how that came about. You may not even know. I don't know, but that seems to me to be somewhat of, it seems like there was some court case regarding polio and whether you had to have it or not, or they were trying to have a court case, maybe it didn't finish, I don't know. But getting the vaccine is a little bit different than proof of a card. And so another question that I want to ask before I move it over to Tova is, it seems to me that obviously the answer to this question constitutionally, unless they want to make it about money and taxes, according to the Supreme Court decision on Obamacare, they cannot force you to have the shot or carry a card. But states can, if states want to do it, and that will depend on states' constitutions. But then there's this whole other question I'm having, thinking about private businesses. And that's why Twitter and Facebook and all of those, they can step on your freedom of speech because they're not the government. So if they don't like what you're saying and they want to shut you down because they're a corporation, they can do that. So to me, another question that's really interesting, in other words, if Twitter and Facebook were run by the government, they couldn't just shut people down unless it was something really egregious, but they can't just shut people down, but corporations can. So what's going to happen with, say, American Airlines or the Broadway theater shows? I guess these privately owned entities can do whatever they want. That's one of my questions for you too.
Right. So I
had another one, but that's all I can really probably handle right now.
On the polio vaccine, I'm not familiar with that, but my guesstimate based on what I know about the law is that they couldn't force you to get the actual polio vaccine, but they could say, we will not allow you to come to a government school unless you have it.
Unless
So-
unless you had the card, you had to have proof.
unless you have proof that, right. So, because most people think you have a right to education, but really you don't. It's not a federal right. It's usually it's a state established right. And the state can therefore condition, make reasonable regulations. So if you are a violent person, if you've done bad things in your life, you shouldn't be able to be a teacher or to go into the school. So there's reasonable conditions. So my guesstimate is that the schools could say, we are going to require you to have a vaccine card. That would be litigated and all that stuff. But I think in the end, there's a pretty good shot. On the private entities, you're exactly right, that they are not part of the government. So you don't have a right to free speech on Twitter and Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok. And so they set up their own rules, and you can do it or not. And so that would be the same if you were to go into a Walmart or a Meijer or to your local mom and pop store or restaurant. Like I live in Michigan, the governor lifted requirements on us having to wear masks to go to a restaurant, but the restaurant can still say, we want you to wear a mask. So they could also do the same thing. We want you to give we want proof of the vaccine card. I don't think anybody's going to do that because they're going to lose all kinds of business, but they have the right to do it, or the authority to do it if they chose to.
Okay, and as I toss this to Tova, thank you for making those quick. As I toss it to Tova, I was just thinking about the businesses. Oh, it's really complicated with COVID, and this isn't really interesting of note. I heard some doctors talk about the fact that we've never actually vaccinated people during a pandemic before. Usually it takes years and years and years to figure out what caused it, and then you end up having the vaccine 10 years down the line to prevent you from getting it. But never has there been a vaccine during the pandemic. And what's interesting, which I think will make cards very, very hard, is you have 30% of the people that don't want to get it. You have another 30% of the people who've had it. And they say, wait a minute, I've had it. I've got proof of antibodies. I don't want a shot. And then you've got 30% of the people who got the vaccine. So if someone comes to your restaurant and wants to get on the airline, they say, but I had it, and here's proof of my antibodies, I don't need the vaccine. This is going to get super, super, super tricky. And I just don't think it's going to come to fruition, because if they have a proof of, and can you imagine having to carry it like you're in some communist society, having to carry proof that you have antibodies? I mean, it's just crazy. And to me, you can't make the person who has already had it and has antibodies get the vaccine. Kathy's her second one today, and she had it. And I hear it's really rough for people who've had it to get that the second shot. It's really hard because they've already had it. And there's a lot of controversy whether you've had it and have antibodies if you even should get the shot. So to me, it just seems impossible to go through the rigmarole. Like, imagine if you want to get on an airplane and you have an emergency and you need to get another state. And they say, well, you have to prove that you've had the shot. And they say, but I've had it. I don't want to get the shot. I have antibodies. But you still, it seems really messy. Okay, Tova, your turn. And Tova, probably it's just going to be, one or two quick questions. And then Judge Warren, quick answers. Same thing for Jewel and Jordan, maybe one each, and then Kathy. Okay, thanks.
Sure. So Jean actually got a lot of my questions. But I was wondering if some states, as you said, states have a lot of freedom to do what they want with vaccination requirements or vaccination card requirements. And, America's so polarized that it seems that some states will do very different things. Like Texas is very open. Where I am in Chicago, it's very closed. So, it's very different. And do you think if some states require vaccination proof, but others don't, do you think that might impact the relationship between states or the ability of people to travel from state to state?
Now that is a perceptive question. Tova, it's so nice to see you again. There's clearly a very big rift in our country right now between what we have fortunately or unfortunately been terming the red and blue divide. And I do think that sometimes who is in favor of a particular position matters more to others than what makes reasonable policy. It's a long way of saying that politics often gets in the way of good decision making because people want a political advantage. So I have no doubt. I have a little doubt, but I agree that or foresee that if some states went one way and some states went another, that would simply continue the exacerbation of this terrible divide that we have in the country, and that people would be picking on each other, and that there would almost certainly be someone, it might be a mayor, it might be a governor, it might be a county executive that says, I don't want you in here if you come from, that other state because, they don't require proof of vaccination. So I think that's possible. But we have a clause in the United States Constitution that is called the Privileges and Immunities Clause, which says that every person that goes between states has all the same privileges and immunities. So that's old-fashioned terminology, and a lot of people don't even today don't really understand what it means. But basically, you have to treat people, if you're in New York and you go to California, they can't pick on you just because you're from New York. They have to give you all the same rights that you would have if you were originally from California. So it would be very hard for a state to put up a red flag and say, no, we require passports and we're not going to let you in just because your state doesn't have passports. Now, once you get there, we've had this in the pandemic. They say you have a quarantine period, you have to get tested and all that kind of stuff. I think as far as I know, none of those were struck down because of the pandemic. So that could possibly happen where they say you can come into our state, but now you've got to get your passport. I think that's possible. So I hope I answered your question.
You definitely did. Thank you. And I know Janine touched on this a bit, but I just want to circle back to schools because right now I only just got back into school and they're thinking of next year, what's going to happen, and a lot of it is going to hinge on whether they decide to require vaccinations, because if they require vaccinations, it seems like, in Chicago, it'll be much more open. And if they don't, they might have to institute some more restrictions, whether you agree with that or not. But that's kind of what the discourse is. So can you just clarify again, can schools, is it perfectly within the legal realm that they would be able to require that only vaccinated students return in person or, return at all? Or require that students get the vaccine? Because I know there are other vaccines that, you have to get before you go to school, like measles. Is the COVID vaccine different, or what's your legal opinion on that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any different legal basis because it's of the nature of the vaccine. So I haven't looked at this all that carefully, but my understanding is that they can require you. I think I have to do it with my kids. In Michigan, you have to show proof of vaccinations. In fact, one of my kids is going out to Brown University. It's not quite analogous, but they're requiring him to produce proof of his health status so that he can attend for summer. So I expect that there wouldn't be a difference between COVID versus polio versus measles. Unless there's some law, which I'm completely unaware of, that says, longer standing vaccines can be. The one hook that could happen that's different is, remember, none of these vaccines have actually been approved. They've all been emergency use. And there could be a difference by saying you have an approved vaccine that's gone through all the testing that Janine talked about earlier, versus, as she said, we're in the middle of this pandemic, we're desperate, we've got these things that looks like they're working, but they have not officially been approved by the Federal Drug Administration. They've just been allowed for emergency use. And there could be, some legal challenge saying, sure, you can force my kid to take the polio vaccine, but that's been vetted, we've gone through all this testing, that's not the case with COVID. I don't know that a court would buy it, but I think it's a stronger argument. That's the only distinction I could see between the two kinds of vaccines.
Our
When you-
hope
There you go.
is that we're going to have herd immunity and this is going to go away. That's the hope we have. That
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah. Okay, Jewel and Jordan, go ahead.
All right, so we have a very interesting personal tie to all this because we've never got vaccines our whole life and been a part of everything in Pennsylvania. Religious exemption demanded it and have never had an issue until the semester before everything shut down. There was a measles outbreak on campus, and that is the only time that we were asked to provide proof, and then a religious exemption wasn't accepted. But in that case, they also bent over backwards in order to ensure that we could do everything in our classes. So the college treated it as if it was then their responsibility to personally create an entire thing just for us to continue class. And it was due to a particular situation of a measles outbreak on our campus. When we're talking about like a vaccine, even whether it's state or whether it's federal, regardless, when we're talking about it in the government, we're talking about, like you said, it's a legislation of health. And to me, it's a question that the only place to find some type of logic or common ground or even principle to make the decision would be if it's rooted in natural law. We had these discussions a while back, and it seemed like our whole law system, our whole governmental system became unhinged as soon as we tried to disjoint it from ultimate truth or reality and from what the words represent in the Declaration, what the founders were really trying to get to. We're not having that debate anywhere. I doubt it's going to happen publicly, but I think that this question with the vaccines only makes sense through that, because we're talking about legislating morality almost in a theocracy manner, because we're talking about getting a vaccine to mitigate a risk based on what criteria. So what percentage of this risk is raising your percentage of getting sick to where I have to get a vaccine? And what's the difference between that or some other risk that we could be taking? And those questions are endless. So why is this power vested in the government here versus other things? Because I could name 15 things that could probably have a much greater negative effect on public health than COVID-19. So, Judge, I guess my question is, from our standpoint, it just seems like we're ignoring so much of the real questions. And yes, we have to talk about jurisprudence, but the founders never said that everything that people in the government did was going to be what was actually constitutional in the first place.
Okay, so that was a whole lot of stuff in there. So let me try to address a couple of things at least. First,
See what I'm talking about with their questions? I have to really pay attention to follow their brilliance and what they're saying. Same thing with Tova. Tova always gets the great question.
Yeah. Comment.
Okay, here we go.
So first off, the religious exemption is a really good point. And this kind of play into your thought about natural law. James Madison, who's often referred to as the father of the Constitution, was instrumental in the adoption of what became the model of our protection of religious liberty in the First Amendment, which was what we call the Free Exercise of Religion Clause, as well as the Establishment Clause. So people have a right to exercise the free exercise of their religion, and that there shouldn't be a government church that you can be compelled to pay for through a tax or required to attend. There's no religious test. You can't be required to practice a certain religion. All the religions have to be treated equally. And there's been a long-standing view, which was kind of thrown aside for time period, but I'm hoping is going to come back, which is that if you have a strong, a genuinely held religious belief that, and the government tries to make you do something against that generally held religious belief, there has to be a very good reason, we call it a compelling interest, and that the reason, the way that the government acts, imposes its view on you is the most limited way. We call that narrowly tailored. So I think we can all agree, for example, that if there was a Satanist that wanted to do child sacrifice, that it's okay for the government to ban that, to protect people's life, because you have this, even though they might have a generally held religious belief in doing something terrible like that, that the government has a compelling interest to save people's lives and just make that criminal behavior, or criminalize that behavior. So you can't say I have a religious objection to, driving through red lights, breaking into people's homes, all that kind of stuff. But when you have something more like this, then the question becomes, can they force you to do it because you might be affecting somebody else? If it's just for you, then that's your own risk, right? And so there really wouldn't be a compelling interest of making you to make sure that you were safe, but could you be a spreader? And so you'd have this clash between religious liberty and the state interest of protecting other people. But now that everybody has a vaccine, or the availability of the vaccine, except for kids, and we now know that most kids, if they get it, are not likely to have any kind of serious health issue. The tables have kind of turned, because when there was no vaccine, everybody could be a spreader and everybody could get sick. And so the government had a really high interest in stopping the spread. But now, based on newest CDC, the government, CDC, I'm trying to remember what that stands for, I'm forgetting now, Center for Contagious Diseases, if they're saying if you're vaccinated, you can't get it, then if you don't get vaccinated, then that's kind of on you, right? It's your own risk. So they would, under the law, they would have a much harder burden to force you to get immunized when you have a religious objection. I don't know what the answer is, but for example, there are some cases where they said they picked out trying to stop churches from having worship services, and the court said no. That they have this compelling interest. They also kind of picked out they kind of picked on the churches, and the bars could still meet, but not the churches. And you can't do that either. You can't treat religious activities differently. To your broader point, this is going to take me a couple more minutes, Janine. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that when any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to establish new government, laying its foundation such principles and organized power such form as to them so seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Those words from the Declaration of Independence were revolutionary in 1776. They remain revolutionary today. You're absolutely right that most people have no idea what I just said, have no understanding of the idea that there's a creator, that we're endowed with unalienable rights, that they come from our nature as being human beings, that they're born in us. We don't have to run to the government and ask for permission to do things. The government is our servant. We're not the servants of the government. And that idea is vanishing with every passing day. And I really shudder for the future of our country, because we are not well informed in that. We don't take that seriously. And we spend a lot of time begging government for permission to do things that are part of our unalienable rights. So that conversation, I've been fighting to have that conversation be taken more seriously for over a dozen years. That's part of what Patriot Week's all about. And so I totally agree that we should have a better prism to view all these things in connection with our freedoms and liberties.
That was amazing. Okay, Jordan, we have 10 minutes. So let's figure out how we want to work this. Kathy, we have Jordan and his question, and Kathy takes questions from the audience. So I guess Jordan, lightning round question, and Judge Warren, lightning round answer, so that we only have 10 minutes, 9 to be exact, so we can get to the audience. Okay, Jordan.
Okay,
go.
wow. So I know that you had mentioned earlier that private businesses could deny you access if they chose to, and your state did not require masks. Now, I remember a case where a private bakery was forced to make a cake for a wedding, and they did not agree on the participants of the wedding. It was a question of religion. They were forced to make the cake by their state. Where does that differ now? So where are those same rules? Because you're saying that now they can deny it, where in prior cases they could not deny making that cake because of diversity laws, race, religion, creed, gender, etc.
Yeah, so the answer is that actually that went up to the US Supreme Court, and the US Supreme Court struck down the requirement of the person to bake the cake. And that was because there was religious animus against the chef, I guess is the baker. And they found that that was unconstitutional. Remember I said earlier that you can't pick on religion, and they found no, they were targeting this man, this baker, because of his religious beliefs. And there was, when they went through the record, what was said when he went to different administrative agencies to figure out if he could bake the cake or not, or had to bake the cake or not, they were very, very insulting and dismissed all of his concerns. So at least at the highest level, we do have a court that I think is very sensitive to religious liberty. They've recently passed a number or issued a number of opinions that have been very favorable to religious liberty. That's not to say that there isn't hostility in several states. We could pick out the usual suspects and say this state's not particularly kind to concerning about religious liberty. And that doesn't mean that people don't have to get forced to go to court and all those kinds of things. But I do think it's taken seriously through most of the nation now.
Okay, Kathy.
Well, thank you, Judge Warren. I want to read a couple of audience comments and then get to just a few questions here. But Rick Mayberry says, Judge Warren is so very good, clear, understandable, and delivered so everyone can understand. And I know we all second that. Thank you so much.
Glad to hear it.
And then Keith Hardeen writes, the confusion comes from the fact that Americans have abandoned their understanding that our forefathers had concerning the authority of natural law in making public policy. And we do have a listener. I know we've done several chats on natural law, but do you have a quick definition of natural law for any listener who might not understand what natural law is?
Sure. So the difference between there's really two major kinds of laws. There's man-made law, which means that we just follow the law that the people agree upon, the government, whoever it might be. And then there's natural law, which is law that comes from a higher source than people. It comes from the creator. So we can have discussion about what that means, but God, the supreme being, the supreme judge of the world, nature and nature's God. It's referred to in many different ways in the Declaration of Independence. And then the question becomes, how do you figure out what God's law is, right? And there's a fight over, but some people believe that there is no natural law, that everything is based on whatever the government or the people want. And that leads to anything goes. And usually, we've had examples of that. The Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, the French Revolution, the guillotine. It usually ends up in a very, very terrible place with lots of blood and dead people. If you believe there's a higher law, usually that means that you believe in life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and that you have a higher obligation to that higher authority to maintain it and protect it.
Thank you. We also have a teacher, Kathy Blanchard, who wrote in, "Good afternoon. I teach high school government and civics, and we're talking about this very topic. What information do you have concerning colleges, universities, higher education institutions that are requiring students to be vaccinated before they return to campus in the fall? Private institutions and public state universities are instituting this policy." I think we've talked a little bit about that, but is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
The only thing I would say is when it's a government, it's harder for them to do it because they have to abide by the Constitution. And so that issue about privacy and liberty that I raised earlier really gets triggered when you have, let's say, the University of Michigan, where I went to law school, go blue, or University of Southern California versus a private school that they're going to have they're going to be a more solid ground, but that's the best I can do.
And then Mark James asks another question about private businesses requiring proof of vaccination. And you touched on this a little bit also, but how is that not a violation of HIPAA? Because that is asking somebody for their private health information.
Well, that's a great question. I am unaware, and maybe there are, but I'm unaware of actually restaurants asking for, or shopping places, retail places asking for the vaccine card. What I've seen is they'll have a sign that says you have to wear a mask if you don't have if you haven't been vaccinated. If they ask for the vaccine card, I do think there's a serious issue with HIPAA, and those might.
Or maybe, has there been some talk about stadiums like professional sports teams or concerts letting you in if you have a vaccine card? Yeah,
I mean, I guess so again, I want to be more careful about this. It's nuanced. You don't have a right to go to the Detroit Tigers game. You don't have a right to do that. So the Tigers probably can require you to show your vaccine card to let you in, because they don't have to let anybody in. They can close down their business, whatever. And so you're choosing to disclose your HIPAA, otherwise protected HIPAA information. So it's really when you're forced into something, like you don't have to fly in a plane. You don't have to take, you don't have to go to the shopping mall. So it's really only when the government, the entity, you're forced to do it, and then they require you to disclose information that's normally protected.
That's really interesting. I think, and I just want to interject here for a second. What I'm getting from this is a sporting event or a travel industry where you don't have a right to do it. They don't have it. They can't, you choose to go to the sporting event. They can say you have to show your card, but the workplace, I think, would be a little bit different. If you have a job and they're going to deny you your job if you don't show your HIPAA, wouldn't that be a little, and Kathy, that was a great question. If you're not willing to violate your HIPAA and show that you have a vaccine, can they fire you from your job?
Well, you don't have a right to a job, or to at least to a particular job. You have the right to make a living. And so I think the more likely source for protecting that is going to be a law that specifically says that your employer can't require you to disclose your health information. And I think those laws are on the books. How broad they are, is a different question. There's also anti-discrimination laws that say, like, you you can't deny somebody employment because of their gender or their race. And I wouldn't be shocked if some states include health information that doesn't affect their ability to perform their job. So there may be, I don't think those are necessarily constitutional rights, but there may be legal rights that are been imposed by states or by the federal government. And Janine, you're muted.
I hate that. Judge Warren, I'm sure we need to let you go. Kathy, do you have a final thought? Because I jumped in there. I just couldn't resist.
Well, Robert Zimmerman does make the point that all airlines and others get loans from government. And so they are connected to government in that way. And that is a really interesting point to consider. But yeah, this is something we could talk about, I'm sure, for another hour.
A few weeks.
Oh, but that is an interesting note about getting money from the government. And so that, well, hey, for that record, Judge Warren, and we could go on forever, and Jewel and Jorn, Aubrey, for that matter, can a private college who accepts money from the government really demand you have a shot? Can you answer that?
I would say that unless there is some kind of legal requirement, strings on that money that says that you can't ask for the shot, then you probably could. That there are restrictions on, sometimes they'll say, like, you can't get federal money. Your kids can't get scholarships unless you let the military recruit on your campus. That's been something that's been talked about. So there could be restrictions like that, but I'm unaware of any that deal with vaccinations.
Interesting. So the money has to be restricted. Okay, this was awesome. We learned a lot. You were terrific, as always. That's why we bring back by popular demand, Honorable Judge Michael Warren. PatriotWeek.org or Oakland.gov to watch you in the court. Yeah. Oakland. What is it?
It's OAKGOV. So it's oakgov.com. Yeah.
Oakgov.com. Okay. Well, super terrific. Thank you, Jewel and Jordan. I'm sorry it was such a long time. We didn't get to hear more questions from y'all, but it was a fascinating discussion. And Kathy, as always, Aubrey, Judge Warren, you for joining us. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Judge Warren. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have some great series upcoming. Kathy, the great series, we're going to do the signers, some of the signers of the actual Declaration of Independence, which will be fabulous. And what was the other one we talked about today, Kathy? There were two. Our other idea.
The Anti-Federalist Papers.
Yes, won't that be cool? Jewel and Jordan will love that. Y'all will, that'll be right up your alley. The anti-federalist, how do they how do their opinions hold up today? And I think that they're going to be pretty popular. All righty. Thank you, everyone. Y'all
Thank you, Judge Warren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.